Welcome back to another session with Sid. So I am Sid, and we're going to be discussing today 3 more elements from the periodic table. So last session, in the last episode, we were looking at lithium, and we used lithium as an example to understand atomic structure. But today we're going to be looking at not 1, not 2, but 3 different elements. So hold on tight and let's get started. So let's have a look at the element hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the entire universe. But before we start looking at the different uses of hydrogen, let's have a look at its chemical symbol. So I've got myself a little card over here, and I'm going to write the chemical symbol. And hydrogen has a chemical symbol H. So we can write a capital H over here. Now, hydrogen has got a very small nucleus. It only has 1 proton, no neutrons, and hydrogen has 1 electron or 1 proton number. Okay, so it has 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So this is hydrogen. We're going to come back to the atomic structure of hydrogen a bit later. But let's have a look at some of its uses and what we know hydrogen is best known for. Okay, so we've already talked about how hydrogen is the most abundant element in the entire universe. And our sun is made up of hydrogen. Okay, so there is a process happening in the sun which changes the hydrogen into helium, and we call that fusion. So the hydrogen atoms in here change into helium. They give off lots of energy, and we have the heat and the light from the sun coming to our planet. So I'm going to draw our little planet over here. Okay, so I have drawn here part of the universe. So the universe started as a small little tiny dot of concentrated mass, and then it exploded, and we have that explosion. Over time it got bigger and bigger and bigger as it expanded. So here we've said it's the most abundant element in the entire universe. About 75% of the universe is made up of hydrogen, and we have hydrogen also in the sun. An easier way to write hydrogen is H2. Whenever you see that, that means hydrogen gas. Okay, so let's write some facts about hydrogen. We know that hydrogen gas is a colorless and odorless gas. So I'm going to draw over here a little test tube, and it's going to be a gas. So we are just going to draw little molecules in that test tube. But we're going to have to close the top of that test tube because this gas can escape. So it's a colorless. Let's write over here. And it has no odor. So we say it's odorless. Now, you might be familiar with hydrogen. Hydrogen was once used in celebration balloons because it also has a similar trait to helium in that it has low density. This means that if you've got air and you've got hydrogen gas will make the balloon rise up. Okay, so it's a bit like helium in that way. Now, the difference between hydrogen and helium is that hydrogen is extremely flammable. Okay, so it's very dangerous. It's extremely flammable and it can explode. So imagine using hydrogen gas in balloons. It's not a very good combination because we have candles when we celebrate birthdays and celebrations, and it would cause a huge explosion. So it used to be once used in balloons, but is no longer used in balloons anymore. It is still in some countries, but it's highly, highly flammable. So it's very dangerous. So the balloons that you have on your birthdays and on celebrations are actually using helium, which is far more unreactive. Okay, so I've made a little flame over here to show that it's highly flammable. So I'm going to write over here, highly flammable. Now, let's have a think about what kind of uses we're going to have for a gas that's highly flammable. Highly flammable. Well, another use of hydrogen is in rocket fuels. So I'm going to draw over here a rocket. Let's colour the sun in as well while we're at it. Okay, so I've drawn here a rocket. Now, hydrogen is, the gas hydrogen is used as rocket fuel because of the fact that it's highly flammable. It makes an amazing rocket fuel. It's very light because it's got low density. So it's an amazing fuel to be used in rockets. So we can say one of the uses of hydrogen is rocket fuel, which is pretty cool. So the explosions that you see after a rocket are usually because of that hydrogen gas exploding. How cool is that? Now, some of the future uses, what do you think some of the future uses of hydrogen are going to be? You might have heard of hydrogen fuel cells. So there are some cars at the moment that use hydrogen fuel cells. And as we go into the future, this is going to become more and more of an area that is going to be explored and researched. So we have a really bad drawing of a car here. It looks more like a van. So I'm going to draw some wheels, and we can say we have hydrogen fuel cells can be used in cars. So hydrogen powered fuel cells. And this will make cars a lot more friendly for the environment, because instead of having harmful gases being released into the atmosphere, we're instead just going to have hydrogen. Okay, so here we can color in the car. Let's do a little coloring in of the car. And there we have it, hydrogen. So hydrogen, just as a summary, we've got hydrogen is found in the sun. It's the most abundant element in the entire universe. It is highly flammable, which makes it useful for things like rocket fuels when you need a burst of energy. It is also a colorless, odorless, and low-density gas. And because of this reason, it was useful in balloons, celebration balloons. But because of the fact that it's highly flammable, it's not advised to use hydrogen in celebration balloons anymore. In the future, we're looking into lots of research into using hydrogen-powered fuel cells in cars and buses and other vehicles, which will make cars and vehicles a lot more friendly for the environment. Right, what we're going to do next is have a look at the atomic structure of hydrogen. Right, so we're going to go back to the worksheet that I produced last time, and I did this for lithium over here. So we've got our atomic shell structure over here. This is what our atomic structure looks like in fancy books, where we want to make it nice and colorful and visual. But in chemistry, we tend to use shells. Now, instead of using lithium here, I'm going to place my card over here. So the same thing applies again. We've got atomic number at the top, we've got the mass number at the bottom, and here this is our chemical symbol. Right, so we want to figure out, what does this atom look like? Well, this time it's not going to have all of these little bits in the nucleus. It's just going to have one proton, because look here, the proton, there's one over here and there's one over here. Now I need to first of all pick the colors for my protons, neutrons, and electrons. So protons are positive. Let's put the one where we've got the negative symbol over here. This is my electron. And then my neutron is neutral. Okay, right, so what is this atom going to look like? A hydrogen atom. It has one proton. So I'm going to get one of my red bits and I'm going to place it in the center. Okay, ignore all the others. We've just got this one proton in the center. Okay, now does it have any neutrons? Well, this mass number shows you how many protons and neutrons there are. We already have one proton, so there's no neutrons. Next, we're going to look at the number of electrons. If it has one proton, it's going to have one electron whizzing around on the outside. Now, what does this look like in a shell structure? Well, in the center, we're going to have one proton. And on the first shell, we are going to have one electron. And we don't really need the second shell in this particular case. Okay, so on this particular case, on the first shell, it's just going to have one electron, not two. And this here is hydrogen. Okay, guys, right. So our second element that we're going to be looking at in today's session is going to be oxygen. So oxygen is something that you're all going to be familiar with. We breathe in oxygen. So let's have a look at the chemical symbol for oxygen. So oxygen is the capital letter O. So oxygen has the chemical symbol O. We also then have two numbers that we need to add to that card. So oxygen has 8 as a proton number and 16 as the mass number. So I'm going to leave that just up here for the time being. Right, let's explore oxygen in a bit more detail now. So oxygen, we've spoken about how oxygen is the one element that we breathe in order to survive. Okay, so I'm going to say over here, let's draw first of all the test tube for oxygen. So if we had oxygen in here, again, it's a gas. It is a diatomic molecule. So it comes in 2 oxygen atoms together. Okay, just like hydrogen, there were 2 of them. We've got 2 oxygen atoms. So when I draw the gas, I'm going to draw 2 atoms like this. We're going to have to close the top of it. Now, there's going to be more oxygen in here than there was hydrogen in the test tube because oxygen has got a higher density than hydrogen. But it is still colorless, so we can't see it. And it is still odorless, so we can't smell it. Okay, now oxygen is really important because it helps us to stay alive. So we will, let's draw here a human body first of all. Okay, so I've drawn the inside of a person here. We've got the opening to the mouth and, oh, the nose has gone slightly further up. It should be over here, right? So the nose and the mouth. And when we breathe in, we have a windpipe called trachea where all of this gas goes inside. And then we have our lungs. So the oxygen gets into our lungs from this windpipe. And we have these 2 little branches that pop out. And we have loads of little branches that fill up our lungs. And our lungs contain something called alveoli, which is where the gas exchange happens. So the oxygen enters the alveoli and it goes into our bloodstream and the carbon dioxide moves in the other direction. So we breathe in oxygen. So I'm just going to draw an arrow to show that oxygen gets breathed in into our lungs. So that is one of the uses of oxygen. It's used by respiration in our cells, in our body. Right, let's have a look at, in terms of the atmosphere, how much oxygen do we have in our atmosphere? So if we think about the Earth itself, it has 21% of its atmosphere is made up of oxygen atoms, or the element oxygen. Okay, so 21%. That means it contains lots of other different gases. We've got nitrogen, we've got helium, we've got hydrogen in small parts, but we still have other gases in the atmosphere. Okay, and 21% of that is oxygen. Now, when we are breathing out, we give off carbon dioxide. Oxygen is a byproduct that's produced by green plants through the process of photosynthesis. So if we think about the carbon dioxide that's being given out, it's taken in by leaves and plants. So CO2, or carbon dioxide, enters the plants. But plants need other things as well to be able to produce oxygen. And the other things are sunlight. So we're going to have sunlight over here. Let's colour in this sun yellow. So we have sunlight. Chloroplast. So in this plant over here, remember your plants are mainly green. And that green colour is coming from chloroplasts, which are tiny little bits of green pigments inside of your leaf. So those chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, which is a green pigment, and the chlorophyll is needed to produce the oxygen and the glucose, which are the two things that are produced in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so we have chloroplasts, we have water going up the plant and into the leaves. So we have water, we have carbon dioxide, we have sunlight. And when we put all of these bits together, we produce oxygen and glucose. So let's write the chemical equation. Right, let's have a look at this process. We have carbon dioxide coming into the plant cells. We have water coming up the plant. And the process of sunlight and chlorophyll together produce glucose, which is the plant's food, plus oxygen. And the oxygen is released back into the atmosphere. And this process is called photosynthesis. So let's write that down over here. Okay? So this is a nice little summary of what's happening. Now, if you're wondering what is happening inside of our lungs, I talked briefly about gas exchange, so that the oxygen goes into our bloodstream and the carbon dioxide comes out. Now, inside of our bloodstream, we have red blood cells. So I'm going to draw over here a red blood cell. Right, so we have these red blood cells in our bloodstream. Now, the amazing thing about these cells is that they have adapted to allow the most amount of oxygen to be carried. So we have all of this cell is carrying the oxygen, and it doesn't even have a nucleus. So our red blood cells are adapted in a way which makes them maximize the amount of oxygen that they can carry. So these red blood cells are the ones that carry the oxygen around our body to all the different cells that need them. And we have the process where they are able to transfer that oxygen to our cells. And our cells need oxygen to be able to survive. Okay, so red blood cells are really important, and it's a nice little note to mention there. So what we're going to do next is have a look at the atomic structure of oxygen. Right, let's focus on now looking at the atomic structure of oxygen. So oxygen has 8 protons and it's got 16 mass number, which means if I do 16 take away 8, that means there's going to be 8 neutrons. Now, I don't think I got 8 neutrons and 8 protons cut out, so I'm going to do a bit of cutting. Right, so I am ready now with my protons, with my electrons, and with my neutrons. So we have over here 8 protons. So that means there's going to be 8 protons in the center over here. So if I were to move all of these in here, there'd be 8 of them here, but I'm not going to put them over here. I'm just going to focus on my electron shells. So I'm going to have 8 protons in the center, 2, okay, so I've done all my drawing of the circle. So these are going to be, if I can demonstrate all of them and you can see all of them. There we go. There's all, and they'll be all mixed up. So all the neutrons and the electrons will be mixed up. They won't be all clustered together like this. The reds and the yellows will be mixed up amongst each other like this. Okay, so there's loads of neutrons and protons. There's 16 altogether in the center of an oxygen atom. Because there's 8 protons, we also have 8 electrons. So we're going to have okay. So this here is what an oxygen atom looks like. It has a huge nucleus, 16 protons and neutrons all added together. So there's 8 protons, 8 neutrons. Then it has 8 electrons on the shells here. So we've got 2 on the first shell, 6 on the second shell. And this here is an oxygen atom. So what we're going to look at next is our third element for today, and it's going to be carbon. So carbon has a chemical symbol C. It has 6 for its proton number and 12 for its atomic mass. So we're going to leave this up here while we explore carbon in a little bit more detail. So carbon is really interesting in that it comes in many different forms, and each of its forms gives a completely different look, property, feel of the material it produces. So let's look at 2 of carbon's famous structures. So one is in pencils. But actually, the little bit that you see that's coming out of that pencil, that's leaving a mark on paper and is going all the way across that pencil inside of it, is actually carbon. And it's called graphite. So we have 2 different types of carbons we're going to look at. We're going to look at carbon in its graphite form, and we're going to look at carbon in its diamond form. Yes, carbon is also in diamonds. So can you believe that the lead or the graphite found inside of your pencils is the same atom, the same element that you also find in diamonds, right? So this is graphite. Graphite is layers of carbon. So if you imagine each of these carbon atoms forms links or bonds with 3 other carbon atoms. So we're going to have, it's going to have 1, 2, 3 bonds there. And all of them are going to have 3. So we're going to have, this one's going to go like this. So there's another carbon atom. So in graphite, we basically have layers of hexagons on top of each other. So this produces lots of tessellation. So if we imagine paper, you've got another sheet of paper, you've got another sheet of paper, they can slide across from each other. That's basically how this carbon structure is formed. You've got a graphite layer and another graphite layer and another graphite layer. And in this pencil, you have lots of different layers. So when you write on a piece of paper, one of those layers is coming off onto the piece of paper. How cool is that? That's how graphite works. That's how pencils work. So in here, we have actually got graphite. It's not lead. Lead is a completely different element and is not used in pencils. Right, let's have a look at diamonds now. So we know that diamonds are one of the strongest materials on the whole planet. So we have, they are amazing bits of material because they're so strong. So how does something that looks grey and dull and breaks easily become into a diamond? And it's the same element. How do we even do that? Well, what is happening is in the Earth's core, well, not even in the core, just underground. As we get towards the core, it gets warmer and warmer. So underground, there is a lot of pressure and heat. So if we were to take graphite or coal is carbon as well. If we were to take coal or graphite and we put it under lots of heat and pressure, which we can't do in your home, so you can't make diamonds in the home, unfortunately. But if we were to take them to a lab, and there's labs that do this, they can take a bit of coal and they put it under lots of heat and pressure, you will get diamonds. Now, inside the Earth, this happens over a long period of time, hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. But you will have amazing diamonds being formed in rocks. Okay, now how does the structure of a diamond change from that of a graphite? Why is diamond so strong? Well, the structure of a diamond is three-dimensional. The atoms in a diamond are three-dimensional. So if you imagine a tetrahedron, and you're probably thinking, what is a tetrahedron? Well, a tetrahedron is a triangular-based pyramid. So if you imagine a tetrahedron, I'm going to place a carbon atom in each of the four corners. Okay, now imagine a carbon atom that's suspended in the center. Now this carbon atom was attached to three other carbon atoms. This one is now attached to 1, 2, 3, 4 other carbon atoms. And this structure is very difficult to draw because if you imagine lots of tetrahedron, it's going to be a three-dimensional structure. So it's very difficult to draw. Now, this makes diamond a very, very, very strong material. So each carbon atom has 4 bonds. In this particular case, each carbon atom has 3 bonds. Now, this makes diamonds really, really hard and strong. So we're going to write over here. Okay, so this is a little summary of carbon. Now we're going to have a look at the atomic structure of carbon. Right, welcome back to the final section, and we're going to be looking at carbon. So we're going to replace that card with carbon. We've got 6 at the top, 12 at the bottom. Let's put our little... Now we've got a total of 6 protons in this particular case. Now again, I'm not going to focus on that because there's so many protons, electrons and neutrons. I'm not going to be able to fit it on there. I'm just going to focus on the electron shells. So we're going to have a total of 6 protons in this atom. So I'm going to put on here... Okay, we're going to have a total of 12 things in the center. If 6 of them are protons, how many neutrons are we going to have? Well, if 6 are protons, we're going to have 6 neutrons. So let's put 6 neutrons in the center too. So we've got 1, okay? And then if we have 6 protons, it means we're going to have the same number of electrons, because remember, electrons and protons are the same because an atom is neutral. So we're going to have 6 electrons. Now, where are those 6 electrons going to go? Well, we can have a maximum of 2 on the first shell. So there we have the atomic structure of carbon. So we have looked through 3 different elements today. We've looked through oxygen, we've looked through carbon, and we've looked through hydrogen. And each one of them has amazing different properties and completely different atomic structures. Now, each element will have a different proton number. That is what defines it as a different atom. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode of the periodic table, and I'll see you next time. Bye.